in Harrisburg Central Office. With me today, I have our program counsel, Jesse Walker, and staff, Elena Vasir, who's Water Pollution Biologist 2, and Shelby Fryermuth, Water Program Specialist. We're going to take an hour. Presentation will be short. The rest of the time will be focused on questions. I'm hoping that everybody can hear me clearly. I will attempt to slow down as much as possible. I tend to get faster as I speak, so bear with me. This is known as the 25 PA Code, Chapter 105, Simplified Water Obstruction and Encroachment General Permit Process. I will say that this process has been in the works for about a year now, and we're at a point where we're ready to spin this out to be effective on March 26th of 2018. After that date, we will require the use of the new General Permit Registration Form for all Chapter 105 Water Obstruction Encroachment General Permits. The information that we are requiring is intended to clarify the process for completing the requirements for a Water Obstruction and Encroachment General Permit Registration in accordance with Chapter 105, the Dam Safety and Waterways Management Act, for all projects that qualify for GP eligibility. To access the information, the revised forms and instructions can be accessed through the Department's e-library website. I will say that that website address has changed, but if you do click on e-library, it should directly link you to the new site. You will continue to select permit and authorization packages, then waterways and engineering and wetlands, water obstructions and encroachments and wetlands, and then general permits. Some important changes to note: the registration form, which is good for all GP authorizations, has been refined and formatted to eliminate redundancies and unnecessary information to register a general permit. The GP registration form instructions have also been simplified for the applicants to explain what is required on the registration form. And the Aquatic Resource Impact Table has been condensed, requiring less information, and that information is also part of the GP registration requirements. On the Aquatic Resource Impact Table, reference to Federal Section 404 impact data has been removed. In the past, this has caused some confusion with clients submitting information with the wrong impact, since Chapter 105 regulates a wider, more broader area than the Section 404 area. The request for impact information will be now by watercourse, floodway, and/or wetland, and it should serve as an expedited method for DEP staff to determine if any impact areas trigger a core review for the federal authorization during that review. And the Aquatic Resource Impact Table itself will become an attachment as part of the registration form. What you're seeing right now is a copy of that with an example. I just informed staff that we're going to add additional information for the examples to provide even a little more clarity. Things that are no longer required for submission: the fee calculation worksheet to identify what your impacts are and the appropriate fees will no longer be required to be submitted with the registration packet. It will still be available on the DEP website and available for your use in helping you to determine the fees, and it will also be used by the review staff in determining whether the fees were adequate for submission. The reporting criteria checklist is now called the PASBGP5 review checklist. It was previously 22 questions that applicants were required to complete and submit with your GP registration. The form caused a lot of confusion. DEP had worked with the Corps over the last several months and got the questions reduced back to 14 questions. We didn't use all 22, and now it will be used as a review list. It will not have to be submitted with a GP registration form. It'll be used by applicants to determine whether or not what your impacts are, whether or not your activity may trigger a reporting action. It will give you the opportunity to maybe further evaluate your project and to maybe reduce your impacts or try to keep within a non-reporting threshold. It also can be used by the permit reviewer in an expedited way to determine where in the application materials to look for the information to determine what triggers a reporting action to the Corps. The Bog Turtle screening form, which has been a form required in the past, will no longer be used, and it has been eliminated. U.S. Fish and Wildlife has made an effort to enter what data they can on bog turtle to the PA Explorer PNDI reporting system. It's my understanding that not all that information is in there, and we are still working with the Corps and U.S. Fish and Wildlife to iron out the details due to the elimination of this form. But if you have a project that is impacting potential wetlands within the 15-county bog turtle area, it's my understanding that it will generate a response for PNDI and whether or not you're going to impact wetlands or not, and you may get a clearance or you may get a hit. At this time, since I do not have adequate information, I would recommend that regardless of your result, that if you propose to impact wetlands in those 15 counties, that you contact a bog turtle consultant to provide further direction on your project. The fee calculation worksheet, as I said, is no longer required for completeness and is planned to be used as a reference available to assist the registrant in determining the correct permit fees. It's 8 pages long and it's pretty much self-explanatory. Again, the reporting criteria checklist is now a review checklist. It will not be required to be submitted. It's for your use in helping you with your review from the applicant side and also from the reviewer side. It actually went from 6 pages to 1 page with 14 questions on. And we've attached a copy of the reporting criteria checklist so you have some idea of what it looks like. At our webinar that we had this morning internally, there were some questions about the criteria checklist, and I'll have to check our website, but with the reporting criteria checklist, there are some triggers that those questions and answers for the 14 questions are based on, and I'll have to see whether or not we have the actual PASB-GP permit on the website for the consultants to look at to determine whether or not you're in eligible waters, et cetera. I don't believe it's on there right now. Again, the bog turtle screening form has been eliminated, and we're hoping that you'll get adequate information as time permits and goes on through the PNDI search engine, through PA Explorer. There are some cases where GP registrations will affect submerged lands of the Commonwealth, which require a submerged land license agreement. That is primarily done here by central office through the review of the regional office or the delegated county conservation districts. That process has remained unchanged, so we'll continue to work with that. With talking with you as a regulated community, the new GP registration form and instructions have eliminated information that is not required to complete a general permit review. by improving permit registration submissions to deliver timely permit decisions by the department. Like I said, this process has been ongoing for just about a year now. There were various focus groups contacted the Corps, they have contacted the department, they have contacted the governor's office, and with their concerns about time delays in permits issuance, which resulted in the development of this new review process. DEP regional staff, the new form and instructions were developed with feedback and input from DE regional programs as well as legal staff, the Army Corps of Engineers to address impact data for the federal authorizations and the SBGP process. One thing that I want to add is under permit decision guarantee, all the GPs except GP 11 are lumped into one process for review, which means right now there is a bifurcated review process for completeness and eligibility. That process delayed permit authorizations because our 105 regulations allow for 60 days to address potential deficiencies. So in a two-step process, you could have up to 120 days per category, 120 days for completeness and 120 days for eligibility. With this new process, completeness and eligibility have been combined, so we're hoping that by requiring less information, better applications will be coming in, and at the maximum, an authorization should not go longer than 120 days. Now, saying 120 days, that means if you have a deficiency, you have 60 days to comply. If you cannot comply within that 60 days, you need to request up to a 60-day extension. You may or may not be granted that extension based on the nature of your deficiency, and there may be less time involved to address it. But keep in mind that the general permit process is just that. It's a general permit authorized across the Commonwealth with the same type of category regardless of where you're at, and it's a very simple process to try to meet right now. So we're anticipating that with less information and better instructions, there should be better packages coming in and authorizations going out more timelier. With that being said, we do have some changes to make to the forms. There's been some grammatical errors that we did not pick up. There's some additional information that we had comments on that we may want to add. But by all means, if you have some suggestions that are helpful to explain something that is unclear to you, please provide that to me by email. My email address is there, and also my phone number. So right now, we have approximately 45 minutes to address any questions you may have. First question is, do you still need a bog turtle clearance? A bog turtle is a federal threatened and endangered species which you need to have a clearance from U.S. Fish and Wildlife for any potential impacts. So yes, it's still required. The bog turtle form, phase 1 form that the department previously had, is no longer required. Will GP1 still require PA fish and boat authorizations? The answer is yes. On the previous GP registration form, there was a place for PA fish and boat to approve the structure. That has been misinterpreted where people felt that they got Fish and Boat Commission authorization. That was approval of their general permit, and it is not. Fish and Boat is approving the use of pre-approved fish enhancement structures. I've talked with Fish and Boat, and they are in the process of providing letters of authorizations that will need to be submitted with your GP registration if you're utilizing GP1. No changes to the JPA process, the joint permit application process, only GPs? No, that's incorrect. The only change to the joint permit process at this time would be the use of the Aquatic resource impact table as part of the joint permit application, and the reporting criteria checklist will now become a review checklist to use for the joint permit application. Is a written E&S plan be required for all GPs or just some of the GPs? A written E&S plan is required for all general permit authorizations. Is there a listing of Bog Turtle consultants available? Yes, I do believe that's available through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife website. Regarding the new impact table, can you please confirm that you are only looking for length and width dimensions and not direct area measurement? Yes, we are looking for length and width. It'll be up to you as the applicant to determine whether or not those areas are permanent or temporary, direct or indirect. Why were the impacts on the aquatic resource impact table changed from square feet to length times width? Because not all processes or impacts associated with a general permit are based on square feet. One of the GPs has a length not to exceed 200 linear feet. A GP3 for gravel bar is 250 feet. For bank stabilization, it's 500 linear feet. It's not square feet. I was running late and logged in late. Will the slides be available to attendees? Yes. Later this week, I will be, we've inquired to where we're going to post that on the DEP website. Will new permit decision guarantee guidelines be issued? Yes, we've revised the program decision guarantee SOP number 2 to address the change in permit decision guarantee. On the previous question about the permit decision guarantee, one change that you need to be aware of is we moved GP5 to the other general permits and left GP11 and the joint permit under permit decision guarantee. Our goal is, because of less information being required, that there shouldn't be an issue with permit decision guarantee using a one-step process. And besides, if you have a GP5 that was required under permit decision guarantee and one that was not authorized under permit decision guarantee, it caused confusion. So we tried to have all the GPs together except 11 to provide clarity. On the aquatic resource impact table, are we to provide the area of impact or the length and width? Length and width. Completeness and eligibility determination process combined, except GP11. How does GP11 process differ? Under a GP11, there is an engineering component that is a for the lack of a better term, a quasi-eligibility type issue. So there's more review involved. That's why it's only authorized by the department, and it should remain a two-step process. Who will review E&S plans for general permits? For GP 11, that's required to be submitted to the department. The E&S plan has to be submitted with the GP 11, and that will be reviewed by the department. E&S plans for other general permits must be reviewed by the county conservation districts. The question, will keys be updated with the changes right away? The answer is no. The changes will be updated in the keys as soon as possible. Since the fee is no longer required for completeness, does the fee need to be submitted prior to authorization? For general permits, the fee has nothing to do with completeness or eligibility. The fee has to be submitted upon submission of your permit registration. As it's done right now, it becomes a completeness issue, but since the two processes are combined, the fee will be required when submitted. Is a site plan to be created separate from an E&S plan? It's not required. It can be, or it can be combined. Will a copy of this presentation be posted online? Yes, later sometime this week. Okay, sorry for the delay. I'm looking at the forms right now. On the registration form, we talk about number 6, overall project plan. That should have been changed to proposed project purpose on the instructions. When we're talking proposed project purpose, as with any authorization, your project needs to show why you're putting it in and the whole purpose of your project. If you're simply putting in a crossing for a utility line, it has to be useful in some method. A driveway is the purpose of the crossing the stream to put the driveway into a house. Utility line. You cannot have a utility line out in the middle of nowhere crossing the stream if it's not connected to something. So that's the whole impetus behind 6 is to tell us what your project purpose is. Typically what we've said in the past, what your overall project plan is. Does new 60-day window for technical deficiencies mean that an applicant must be authorized or denied within 60 days at the beginning of the technical review? Okay, first of all, keep in mind that other than GP 11, there isn't a technical review. It's an eligibility review, which is combined with completeness. So the items that you are submitting with the GP registration to make a complete package will help us determine whether you're eligible for GP coverage. Hopefully, if you submit a complete package, you will receive your authorization within 60 calendar days. It doesn't necessarily mean it's denied within 60 days. It all depends on whether or not, through that review, if it's determined whether there is a deficiency or whether or not it's not even eligible for coverage or not. For the joint permit application, will the USACE, Army Corps of Engineers, require their own version of the Aquatic Resource Impact Table? I can't answer for the Corps, but we did work with the Corps on this table, and they are in agreement to accept that for impacts that we need to report for them for SPGP purposes. Do all these changes apply to GP 11 as well? Yes, they do. Can you please restate the information about the fee calculation worksheet? All right, the fee calculation worksheet will still be available on eLibrary with our GP registration information. It can be used as a tool for you as a client to determine what your impacts are and what associated fees need to be submitted with that permit submission. It can also be used by the DEP or County Conservation District reviewer to determine whether or not the fees have been adequately submitted, to determine whether or not it meets the completeness/eligibility requirement for the registration. Is a wetland delineation report needed for all general permits or just those that impact wetlands and streams? Well, you need a wetland delineation report for the GPs that you're impacting wetlands, yes. You wouldn't need it for streams. Will you hold the authorization until Conservation District has approved the ENS plan? The ENS plan is a separate authorization by the County Conservation District. If we acknowledge your general permit at the DEP, you're informed in that process that you need approval of your ENS plan. Some county conservation districts have been able to review/approve GP 11. That is alarming because they're not authorized to acknowledge GP 11. GP 11 can only be acknowledged by DEP regional office. Will this change? No. Will an approved letter from the County Conservation District for the E&S plans be required for GPs other than GP 11? County Conservation District is required to deem your E&S plan adequate for general permit authorization. It may be the form of a letter. It may be a verbal approval. I cannot tell you how they can do all their authorizations. GP 11 will be, the E&S plan for GP 11 will continue to be approved by the department. If the fee is not submitted, is the permit denied or withdrawn? If the fee is not submitted with the general permit registration, you will receive a notice that it is incomplete. And let me elaborate on that. On the GP registration form, under Section G, where it says Decision Review, whoever's reviewing the permit will sign as the reviewer the disposition status of your GP authorization. In the disposition status below that, there are 4 blocks: acknowledged, withdrawn, incomplete, extension request. If you fail to submit the fee with your permit, we will do the review, but you will get this box checked incomplete with a date and the comment say must submit fee before we proceed. We're attempting to get away from authorization letters with GP registrations and using the registration form itself as the authorization to let you know what the status of it is. There will be some cases on larger projects with multiple GPs that we will continue to use the letters. For aquatic resource impact table impact measurement to an irregular shaped wetland, do you want the longest length to the widest measurement, or the length to width measurement that approximate the square footage of the impact? I do not want the square footage of the impact. I want the length and the width of your proposed crossing. The new GP form instructions do not reference the projects that change a waterway opening form. Is that still required? I am unclear of what form you're referring to. Can you repeat the comment on E&S plan review by county conservation districts? Required or not required? E&S plan review is required by county conservation districts. Other than GP 11, the review will be done for E&S by the regional office. On the aquatic resource table, do you want to see the water course and floodway listed on separate lines like the example? Yes, that would be preferred. What is considered an oil and gas project? Are smaller gas utility lines considered oil and gas projects? It all depends on how they're classifying their oil and gas project. If it's a oil and gas gathering line, as by definition, it's processed by DEP Oil and Gas. If it's a utility line that's transmission line that's sending gas, it may or may not be reviewed by a county conservation district who has delegation. So it all depends on how the project is characterized and who will do the review. Our quarterly impact spreadsheet's changing because of the aquatic resource impact change. Yes, we will be working on changing that quarterly report. I know that there's been some districts concerned that they would like to have that eliminated. That information is still needed for both DEP use and to record core impacts. Since wetlands aren't rectangles, should the length and width be based on the longest measurement for each? I need the length and the width of where you're crossing the wetland at. Will permits currently being prepared and submitted before the new forms are enacted require new forms to be submitted? My answer to that is no. Staff will be instructed to process permits as they are submitted before March 26th. After March 26th, a new form will be required. So anything in the pipeline will be reviewed based on that information. What is the process now for submitting a project that would be considered reporting by the reporting criteria checklist? The process has not really changed. If you submit a project to DEP or the County Conservation District, that based on the information you've provided, the review criteria checklist can be used by the reviewer to determine whether or not your activity is still considered reporting to the Corps. Nothing on the SBGP-5 process for reporting has changed. Why are project description item 3 and project purpose item 6 separated? Couldn't these be listed in the same attachment? There is room for description on the application, but there's no room in the application for project purpose. We wanted them separated so you would describe your crossing and then describe the purpose of your crossing separately. What happens if I did not calculate my fee correctly when I submit it to DEP? Will they start the review if I did not pay enough? Will they reimburse me if I paid too much? The answer is when your permit comes in to the regional office of the County Conservation District, one of the first steps that they will look at is determining whether or not your fee is correct. If it's not, then this new process will tell you that it's incomplete and tell you what fee should be submitted. If you overpay, there is a whole new avenue to go through with that. I'm not sure what the reimbursement process is, but it could be lengthy. What is the effective date for these forms to be eligible for ongoing permits? The effective date for these new forms is March 26, 2018. Permits currently being prepared and submitted before new forms are enacted require new forms to be submitted. No. Page 4 of the GP form includes the first page of the Aquatic Resource Impact Table. Is this supposed to be replaced by the completed table or left blank in the GP form? It's the Aquatic Resource Impact Table in the GP registration form is meant to be an example. You will have to download the Aquatic Resource Impact Table separately and insert it on page 4 to be submitted with your GP registration. On the new Aquatic Resource Impact Table, the impact is listed for stream, floodway, and wetland. How would we now report impact for wetlands within the floodway? You would report them as wetlands. Don't report them as both. Again, is an E&F plan required to be submitted to local county conservation districts for approval for projects under 1 acre of disturbance? An E&F plan is required to be submitted to the county conservation district for all projects, regardless of acreage. When submitting an application including GP11 and a GP5 and a GP3, would DEP authorize all GPs within the application, or will the application be divided with the conservation district? If there is a GP11 to be reviewed, the GP5 and the GP3 should be reviewed and authorized with the GP11. Bear with me, I'm looking for the information. From what we've determined, that the note that says see Section E for additional authorizations was an omission from a previous form that we forgot to remove. So we will remove that statement. Our Act 14 letters and delivery proof still required as part of the registration package. Act 14 letters were never required with a registration package. This has been a misnomer for quite a few years. Part of your registration process is when you submit a GP registration to the Commonwealth or the County Conservation District, that a copy be sent to the municipality and the county. We don't require proof that you've done that. Act 14 requires that, but that's under the joint permit application, not the general permit. That is the new website where you can obtain the GP registration information and all the other materials. Should the impact lengths and widths be average or maximum dimensions? They shouldn't be average. They should be as close to the dimension as possible. Is there specific containment requirements for utility line crossings from the department in addition to the SPCC requirements? Can you spell out what the SPCC requirements are? I'm not aware of that term. Does the County Conservation District approval of the E&S plan need to be obtained prior to submission of the GP? No. Can the E&S plan review be completed concurrently or after the GP authorization? Yes. On the new registration form, when you select drop-down in the non-government box, it widens the width of that column and messes up the formatting of the document. Can this be corrected? In fact, it changes the revision date on the next page. We will contact document processing about that glitch. To clarify, all proposed impacts to wetlands and counties with known occurrence of the bog turtles still require a Phase 1 bog turtle survey, not just areas within the P&I hits for bog turtle. That is correct. For pipeline projects on the aquatic resource impact table, is it acceptable to report actual impact acreages of wetland impacts that are different than crossing length times width? No, we want length times width. We will calculate what the acreage is. What about in the case of a land development project, joint permit, where the entire wetland is impacted? How should the length and the width of an oddly shaped wetland be determined? I would say that you should come up as closely as possible with a length and width dimension for that wetland. If there are incompleteness items, will they be listed in the eligibility deficiency letter? They are intended to be listed in the eligibility deficiency letter, yes. Please clarify overall project purpose from Section 6. Can the project description and project purpose be included in one document, i.e. combining Sections 4 and 6? Overall project purpose, that term will be removed and it will now be project purpose. We want Sections 4 and 6 separated. For one, to describe the activity that you're proposing, and then describe the purpose of their activity separately. Part of that is to determine what your overall project is being proposed. Clarify, all proposed impacts to wetlands and counties with known occurrences of bog turtle still require a Phase 1 bog turtle survey, not just areas with bog turtle hits for bog turtle. Unless I'm reading that wrong, if you're proposing to impact a wetland in a known bog turtle county and you do not get a clearance, a bog turtle survey may be required by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. As I said before, you would need to contact, at this time, a bog turtle surveyor, determine how to proceed with that. Will FEMA maps still be required for submittal with the GP registration? I don't have any GPs in front of me. I'm unsure whether a FEMA map is required for submittal, but there are areas where GPs are not eligible in FEMA map floodways. So if you're in a FEMA map floodway, you should not be registering a GP for that project. In reference to the last question, should you always submit the other GPs with the GP11 to DEP, or can I still submit through the Conservation District? If you're registering a GP that has to go to the department, it's highly recommended that you submit other GP authorizations as part of that project to DEP. Where can the draft documents of the new forms be found? The new forms are on eLibrary or the Greenport website at this time. Will DEP be converting to an electronic submission system in the near future? We are working on that. I cannot give you a deadline when that will happen. Are districts required to fill out the PASBGP5 reporting criteria checklist or only use it as a guide for reviewing projects? They are no longer required, it's no longer required to be submitted. It can be used as a guide by both the reviewing party and the applicant. The length and width of a wetland impact can vary with a wider corridor, say 100-foot pipeline corridor. Did we report the maximum length and width through the wetland or the average length and width? This could result in an overestimation of impact area for a joint permit application. Well, I don't know of any GP that can authorize a 100-foot wide pipeline corridor. I imagine a GP5 would not qualify. But to answer your question, I would report the maximum length and width of the wetland unless there's a big variant difference, and then try to point that out in your narrative to depict that on your aquatic resource impact table. In reference to a previous question, should you always submit the other GPs with the 11 to DEP, or can I still submit them to the County Conservation District? The County Conservation District should not be reviewing GPs associated with a GP11. They should all be reviewed by DEP. Is there any utility line containment requirements specific from the department? Spill prevention, control, and countermeasure is a federal requirement. As part of a utility line, under Chapter 102, there's a pollution prevention control plan, a PPC plan that's required, which is actually part of the E&S plan approval for the utility line crossing itself.
This is Jesse. I would just wanted to note too, based on the follow-up of that last question, that, and just to make clear that none of the substantive requirements for GPs have changed as a part of this process.
Since the E&S plan may be submitted separately, what if the review of the E&S changes the design of the acknowledged GP? Well, the E&S plan should not be changing the designs of the acknowledged GP to begin with. The E&S plan should be based on what has been acknowledged by the department and the GP. If you have wetland impacts in a Bog Turtle County and a PNDI hit with no hits for bog turtles, is there any additional bog turtle investigation required? As I stated before, I'm unclear at this time. I need to have discussions with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Army Corps of Engineers, but I recommend that you contact a bog turtle consultant for further clarification. How can the SBGP checklist be used by the reviewing party if it's not required to be submitted? Keep in mind that the reporting checklist is a set of criteria to determine whether or not your project is non-reporting or a reporting action to the Corps. So the checklist does not have to be completed by the applicant for the reviewer to determine whether or not they submitted the correct information. It would be all part of the information provided in the GP registration. For instance, if you have a water course impact greater than 250 linear feet, it is a reporting action to the Corps. I don't need that checked on a checklist. It will be showing up on your aquatic resource impact table. So the checklist is to be used as a trigger for the reviewer to look at different places in the registration to determine whether or not that application is going to be non-reporting or reporting. We're at our 1 hour, so this will be the last question. When filing a GP5 and GP8 together, do the crossings need to be broken up into separate rows on the aquatic resource impact table, or can they be combined? Since these are two separate authorizations, they should not be combined. They should be separate. I'd like to thank you for your participation. As I said before, if you have some changes you'd like to recommend or additional information to provide clarity, feel to send me an email outlining what clarifications you would like to see and where you would like to see them at, and we will consider those. It's a possibility that if we get these soon enough, I may be able to have the changes made prior to March 26th. Again, thank you for your participation, and have a good day.